This is it, people. This is what you've been waiting for. This is Everyday Celebrity Podcast. The podcast for everyday people with everyday problems, trying to find everyday solutions to accomplish everyday goals. Let's start the show. You. Welcome to another episode of Everyday Celebrity Podcast. Thank you for the thousands of people listening around the world. Shout out to all my fans in London and Dubai. Today, I wanted to sit down because there's a lot of shit going on in the world today. And I want to talk to someone who can give some insight on how to deal with that. Depression, like people feeling sad about losing their jobs, the COVID, people being depressed on not being able to go out. It's driving people crazy. Yeah, all the racist stuff that's going on. How Donald Trump is basically giving a voice to of people who are racist, but were undercover racist, but now they're like out in the world speaking freely. And so we have a special guest, and we're being joined by a Everyday Celebrity Podcast veteran. She's going to be co-hosting with me. Welcome back, Zola.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And the special guest today, we have a doctor here, and this guy is an actual... Well, I hope he's an actual doctor because I'm gonna look stupid. Dr. Anthony was it Morice or Morice?
Morice works.
All right, Morice, you gotta you can move the mic to you, yeah.
That work?
Yeah. Okay. All right, so doctor, how are you doing?
I'm good. Chilling.
What is your title? Like your job title?
Yeah, so I'm a mental health clinician right now at Girls Inc. of Alameda. It's a nonprofit agency that contains a mental health clinic within that. Finishing up postdoc hours. I can give other credentials at this moment just to orientate. So I graduated with my doctorate in clinical psychology from California Institute of Integral Studies last year. It's like a grad school in Soma in San Francisco. Started teaching there. I've been teaching there in the master's and the doctorate program, human development, and the addiction classes for the last year. Finishing up my time in my postdoc. I'm actually going through termination right now with all my cases and all my families. I finish there in a couple weeks and plans to take some time off after 6 years of grinding through grad school. Return to my body and sanity, and then start
you can keep going.
And then start a private practice virtually, probably.
How many years of schooling does it take to get to where you are, or when you finish everything? How many years of school would you have completed?
4 years bachelor's, 5 years doctorate, so 9. And then another year of clinical hours to finally get the license.
Clinical hours is just basically like on the job training.
Yeah. So total for the degree, it's 7,000. hours unpaid work in the last 6 years. Something like that, yeah.
Did you major in psychology for your bachelor's degree?
I did, yes, at Arizona State University.
Okay, so I have a theory that a lot of times people who major in psychology feel that they have something going on with themselves mentally.
Oh, here this comes.
I mean, it's a theory that I've heard. Do you think this applies to you? And if not, have you seen other people where you think this would apply?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think it's absolutely true in one form or another. I think when I became curious about things like psychology and philosophy when I was 16 and 17, I was just looking for a way out for whatever my life was, whatever I was experiencing at the time. So it's a quest to understand the other and myself simultaneously.
It's a way to understand your own mind, right? In a way?
Kind of. If that was 100% possible.
Right. It's not, of course.
Yeah.
The brain is a very, very, intricate thing, very complex thing. A lot of people try to understand it and they can't. What did you learn about the brain, your own brain?
Well, we don't, it's like the neuroscience right now is still extremely primitive. So there's like trillions of neurons. The most we can do right now in terms of just the brain. And now what my curiosity and my interest in is not neuroscience per se, but more so the realm of subjective meaning and like identity and like the interior sort of the self and how it arises in relation. So I study a lot of psychoanalysis and relational theory, things like that. My only qualm with neuroscience, I think too often the human predicament gets reduced to these biological mechanisms in the brain. And so you can have a whole world of dynamics and suffering. And somebody of power, right, with the proper credentials takes all of that and just says the cause is a malfunctioning neurotransmitter in your brain. You get a medication, it shuts down that portion of the brain, and you go back to real life. But it feels so far removed from like what's actually happening.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting stuff. I mean, I've always thought about how our brain is almost just kind of like, it's a machine, and if you do kind of condense it all down to, well, it's just a mechanism that works to bring us, from one place to the other for us to be able to understand, what we're seeing, a way for us just to perceive reality and live in this world. And then all our experiences are funneled in through that. Each person has their own unique print, their own neurological their neurological pathways are. They're all each unique, but in a way, it's kind of, it is what it is. Like, you can't really change that. And it kind of reduces it to almost like a predeterministic way, outlook.
Yeah, totally.
I'm going to let Jordan take over.
All right. So explain to me. So you went to Arizona State, right? Mm-hmm. Are you from Arizona?
I am born and raised.
How was undergrad for you?
Did a lot of drugs. Made a lot of bad decisions.
Because Arizona State is like a #1 party school in the country, right?
It is, but my partying. Well, I might as well get juicy with my past now, right?
Yeah,
Just to spice things up.
Yeah, well, I was going to give you I was going to wait a little bit before I started talking about, but we can get into it now.
Yeah, I've had a direct experience with substance abuse and addiction and all sorts of forms of sobriety and healing. When I was 21, it was heroin. And
you were addicted to heroin?
Yeah. And I lived in a trailer in Arizona and shot up.
This was while you're in college?
Yeah, well, I dropped out eventually.
Oh, okay. Because of the heroin addiction?
Yeah. So I was 21. I went into rehab and I met my first sponsor in the 12-step program.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah. We're more similar than I thought.
Yeah.
So,
did you dabble with drugs and all that while you were in high school, or did it bust on the scene in college?
It was definitely high school. It was just, once I got to high school, I was like, really good at getting good grades in wrestling. And so I was able to maintain a really positive self-image, but there's always something that goes wrong, and all these feelings of insecurity, inadequacy. Very easy to smoke a lot and drink a lot and take a lot of pills and whatever anybody has. Yeah. Had a lot of fun. And then I had knee surgery when I was 17. I got prescribed opiates, Percocet and Oxycontin, the good ones from back in the day. And then it was straight opiates for 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. How does Oxycontin make you feel? Like, I never done it before, so I was just wondering.
Kind of like heroin.
I've never done heroin either.
It's like
for everyone listening,
like when you're really stressed out, stepping into a warm bath.
Yeah, it's like warm molasses being funneled down into you, just taking over. Yeah.
Let's not get you guys thinking about this shit again. All right, so you were in college. You went to college. Did you get accepted to any other colleges besides Arizona?
Maybe. I knew I wanted to go to ASU. And then for graduate school, I knew that I did not want a university experience. I thought it was very mechanistic and ritualized. I was not interested in doing research. I was interested in doing direct clinical work. And California Institute of Integral Studies was actually featured in a book by my favorite writer at the time, a guy named Ken Wilber, who was a philosopher. And within this fictional book, he attends the school and listens to the lectures and makes fun of them, really. So I found it through that.
What's the name of the book?
Boomeritis.
Boomeritis?
Yeah, Ken Wilber is his name.
So, was that your intention off the jump to be studying psychology?
I think so. I remember fantasizing about it when I was 17.
What is it about psychology that interests you so much?
Good question. Well, I found someone who I thought knew about it.
Is it because, well, this is what they say about all people who study psychology, you just want to fuck with people's minds and shit. Yeah. You know, all the craziest people in the world were psychologists, right?
Yeah.
Fucking the person who gave Hitler the idea of killing all the Jews was a psychologist. Did you know that?
Put me in that book.
I thought I was going to be the one with all the crazy questions.
The person who who started apartheid in South Africa, I think he was a psychologist.
That makes sense.
I mean, there's some other like crazy motherfuckers who study psychology, who were psychologists, but yeah. But what was your reasoning?
It was really from finding Ken Wilber. It was from when I would read his stuff. It was a lot of, he would take Eastern spirituality and blend it with Western psychology. And he brought a lot of different ways of thinking together, and it just exploded my curiosity. I really wanted to study the human mind. Who am I? You know, this constant obsessive question of who am I and who are you and how that looks.
Did you learn a lot about yourself during majoring in this? Like learning more?
Yeah. Well, I had to go through my own experience. For me, I'm a fan of psychoanalysis. I study psychoanalysis just as a classical way of approaching speaking and listening, and offering someone a space to. So I've had my own experience. I was in analysis for 3 years with my analyst, and that was a terrifying, difficult, and valuable experience.
Wow, I bet that taught you a lot. So like going through that, did you take some of like, I don't know, his core practices into the way you practice psychology today?
Absolutely.
What were some of those tenets?
Well, it's not, the experience that I had isn't fully generalizable to what I can do with others. Because I was seeking specifically psychoanalysis, which is something that's like really, really intense for most people. It's different than regular therapy to a certain degree, where he wasn't like a friend, or he wasn't an active person in the room who was sharing his opinion and thoughts.
Right.
He would just set up this space for me to encounter my own truth as it flies away moment to moment, and I try to speak my heart out.
Yeah, I've heard about psychoanalysis. I think it's a really interesting practice.
Explain. I don't mean to interrupt you, but explain psychoanalysis. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
Because when a lot of people, when they hear that, they'll probably be thinking like, my parents are sending me to like gay camp to like try to get me from being a lesbian or something. Then they're like putting wires on my head and electrocuting me. Yeah,
traditionally back in the era, like 100 years ago, it was used for just that. But 100 years ago, it was seen as a...
I was just joking.
I know.
But all right.
That is a real thing though, for sure. It used to be that way. But that's not caused by psychoanalysis. That's just, they thought homophobia was a malfunction.
Yeah.
Right?
But what is psychoanalysis though?
So you have this guy, Sigmund Freud, right? And this is how it started. He's a physician. He's a doctor in Vienna. Austria, and it starts with this group of women who are coming into the clinic and they can't move their limbs, or they're having what he later calls hysterical problems, right? Mm-hmm. Something's going wrong with their body, and all the physicians can't figure it out, and he starts listening to them, right? And something else happens when he begins listening to them and making them speak over and over and over, is they start laying out their life stories. And after months and months and months, there's connections between their current symptoms and their like self as a person, right? And at the time in the culture, you had to keep sexuality really repressed. So women's sexuality was repressed by society and by culture. And so they're having all these symptoms. So basically, he entered and opened up this sort of path. When you really, really listen to someone for a long amount of time, there's these other dimensions that come into play that you can play with. Like, why does they'll tell you a story every single time and they'll go out and do something different, you know, like that part of it gets brought into the room. So eventually it's turned into a service that can be provided and manualized and ritualized, and that now there's rules and it's organized and people lay down on the couch. And the golden rule is free association. So someone lays down on the couch and starts talking about all their problems and their suffering. And the golden rule is you just say whatever pops up into your mind. So you get these these encounters between the doctor and the patient that last years of someone just speaking their heart out, and all this stuff, their dreams, the slips, the things they accidentally say, everything takes on a sort of life of its own, and people have these really incredible experiences. It's like transformative. Mm.
So the doctor does the free association, and we'll just say a word, or it's the person.
The person's okay. So like someone has some crazy dream and they're describing it, and this scene in their dream, suddenly they're reminded of this traumatic experience they had when they were young. Something like a moment like that.
So I'm sure you know about this phenomenon where, you know, and there's been a lot of psychologists accused of implanting fake memories of trauma into their patients. And there's this other kind of mechanism of the mind called unconscious memory repression. Yeah. So do you believe that someone could recover traumatic events from, let's say, when they were like 0 to 2 years old? And then do you also think that there is kind of a misguided practice where some psychologists will make inappropriate, use inappropriate suggestive methods to sort of implant memories when someone's having problems? Or what's your views on all of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think any psychologist runs the risk moment to moment of imposing their own meaning into the world of the patient, or misinterpreting what's there, or projecting a wish of their own. So there's always this potential for it really comes down, I think, to fluctuations of power. The person in power, right, to impose their own, whatever it is. And it's a very human thing. I listen to kids. I'm a therapist for kids, and I have kids that are suicidal, that are depressed. And it's so tempting moment to moment for me to just jump in and be like, well, you should feel like this, or you should think like this, or you should do that, or that's the reason. So there's that. And no, I don't think that there are actual psychologists who are profiting off of intentionally doing this thing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's not an intentional thing, but sometimes unintentionally they have maybe seen so much, or they've seen so many cases that, they
make mistakes.
I think they're potentially doing it on purpose, because when you're a child psychologist, and if you work at a high school or something, for example, isn't it, don't you get more money? Doesn't the school get money with more kids or special ed kids? So you have all these child psychologists who sees this kid, a 5-year-old kid, he has shit ton of energy, and then the psychologist says, oh yeah, he has ADD. But all 5-year-olds have shit ton of energy. You know what I'm saying? All 5-year-olds are like going like this on the fucking table and shit.
Yeah.
So the child psychologist comes around and says, "Oh, I'm going to diagnose him as ADD." Now he's in the special education. Now the school gets more money for that student to provide special education. So there's a lot of psychologists out there who misdiagnose children. That's a big thing, and it's a big issue in for minority children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What's your views on that? Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. I think, but we're talking about the issue of diagnosis, which, as you painted it, I think is completely true. But I don't know that, like, for example, yes, psychologists overdiagnose, and there's this problem with diagnosis just as a normal thing to which we're speaking to. But I don't know that, for example, it's because they're going to get more funds, right? It's just something that happens perpetually. And I can give an examples of this. And I think tying it to underprivileged children especially is true. A good example is a young black man in a hospital who's having a psychotic break is much more likely to get diagnosed with or overdiagnosed. That's one population that's just been shown to be overdiagnosed. People of color, children in schools are getting diagnosed with oppositional or conduct disorder. They're more likely to be interpreted as having a combative issue with authority than they are to have, say, an emotional regulation issue. So I absolutely think that's happening. And like a good example is, for me, I get a case. It's the parents who bring in a kid.
So you work with children?
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I do direct therapy with the children, and I do sessions with the
parents. I just continue your story.
So the kid, there's something wrong with this kid, right? He has all these behavioral problems.
So that's what the parents are thinking.
That's what the parents. So immediately, just at that level, the kid's experience is getting misinterpreted and painted as bad. So when they bring him in for therapy, it comes with these undertones of make him behave, make him conform, fix this behavior. And when you look at the behavior, it's like, not to pull back to Freud, but the iceberg, like the behavior represents a whole world of like suffering underneath. And the only way this kid has to express or communicate is engaging in this one thing, right? So it runs deep. It runs beyond just even the trends with specifically different races or anything. It goes all the way just the setup with the parents and the kid, and the kid's always a problem to the family system. And
have you ever diagnosed? I mean, you work with a lot of children. Are they mostly minority children?
Yeah.
Do you diagnose a lot of children with shit?
Yes. Yeah. And I have to in order to do my work, because right now, for example, Medi-Cal is the one who funds people's treatment, right? Medi-Cal is like the main insurance. So in order for somebody who has Medi-Cal to receive any type of services, they have to meet Medi-Cal's criteria. And so Medi-Cal is the one with the power who determines the standards that somebody has to meet. So I have to make sure that these kids are diagnosed and that they qualify with something that gives us the funding in order for us to treat them.
Otherwise, they won't get the treatment.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
So, I kind of put this question before. I mean, I know there's a lot of protocols, processes, methodologies that, Girls Inc. probably uses. Every institution has their own protocols. Usually there's standard protocols that, are like California protocols, San Francisco protocols, Bay Area protocols. Are there certain protocols, for example, the one you just mentioned, that you think should be changed? And is there more than one?
Yeah. Well, in this case, the regulating body is Medi-Cal, right? For the criteria in order to do treatment. There's sort of government type agencies that regulate things like licensing. So the California Board of Psychology regulates licensure. So you have to abide by their rules and ways of practice in order to keep your license. I don't know as a function, that's always kind of needs to be there. And I think there's always a way in which it's not going to fully capture the possibilities of what you could do.
Right.
So I don't think there's such thing as like a perfect set of codes in the first place.
Of course.
So there's always this tension between spontaneity.
Could you name a time when you think that a protocol or, the kind of overall methodologies used in your line of work has actually hindered your progress with a patient?
Yeah. That's a tough one. Well, there's a pressure that hinders it, which this pressure, and the way I write a note has to abide by the standards. So just the language that I use to depict a child is already conforming to a preconceived notion. So it's like a pressure in the room. Sometimes, like if this kid's doing really healthy, then I can't see him anymore. So there's all sorts of little mini pressures that sort of hover around. But have I felt that I've ever had an issue with the protocol that's caused damage? No, not necessarily.
Okay. That's good.
Sure if I'm answering that question.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I mean, I just, from my experience hearing from my mother, I mean, she's a psych nurse. It's a different, area, but I know that there's all these protocols that are in place that sometimes kind of hinder the work you do. And of course you need to have order and you need to have things, run smoothly and functionally. But let's say, for example, like the 72-hour hold, there's certain people who are very dangerous and, and then they're not able to get, the services they need because, they're only able to be in there for 3 days, or just generally like money is an issue. So, I mean, not just like, in a small way, but like in a larger grand scale kind of way, like, the fund, how funding is distributed, what happened, like, other treatment plans they can get, how, that all of that works. Yeah. I've heard like, I've heard complaints from my mother's end about how that all works. So I was just wondering what you thought about that. Or
I get, like, one of the lessons I learned in the past couple of years working for this clinic, my supervisor often talks about, I have to think of myself as a limited resource. So the demand for services is larger than the supply of services. And so there's immediately this miss. That means, so like if we were to create services for a given population, it's from the beginning not going to be enough. Mm. So I have to manage that with my caseload.
Yeah.
Because the line for people that are suffering to get in the door is always going to be long. So there's not enough resources, or especially not for public mental health.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger sister named Natalie.
How young?
4 years younger than me.
How old are you?
I'm 30.
Your parents still married?
They are. Yeah.
They're still in Arizona?
Yeah. They have a little camper. They take her out and they're living the high life.
Were you a problem child?
Yeah. I was the first son of my father. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of the attention, a lot of the praise, caused a lot of problems. Once I got to high school, that's when it started to.
What were you like in high school?
Well, right before high school, I was like a nervous wreck, little kid, shortest, youngest in my grade, really, really low self-esteem. Mm-hmm. And then I got to high school and I joined wrestling, and immediately I got like a Leatherman jacket. So I had to I got to create an alter ego. That was like, I'm the shit. I'm powerful.
Were you like a star athlete?
Yeah, I was like multiple captain. Yeah. So
Did you get any colleges looking at you for wrestling?
No, I didn't do college. I didn't do college wrestling.
Okay. All right. So you After Arizona State, right? After Arizona State, where did you explain your life after Arizona State?
Yeah, well, I went to rehab when I was 21.
Oh yeah,
dropped out of school.
Was it after freshman year or what? Sophomore year?
Well, I transferred with an associate's. I didn't do like the live-in campus. I went to like a satellite campus. I was a heroin addict by the time I got to ASU, so I was never into the college scene per se.
Was heroin like real easy to get in?
Yeah,
in
it was
Arizona?
cheap. It was coming up from Mexico, black tar heroin.
How long have you been sober?
Off of heroin, 9 years.
I mean,
how long have you been clean off of? I mean, have there ever been other drugs in your periphery? Like
you still do drugs?
I mean, fun recreational-ish.
I mean, your employer's not listening to this. I hope. So you just gave up heroin?
No,
Oh, you still do heroin?
No,
oh.
I got 100% sober for a long time, for many years, and then I had very different experiences, and now that is no longer my truth or home.
Was it easy to stop?
No, it was like dying. It was like dying. It was like saying goodbye to everything, all comfort, all sanity, everything.
Did your parents know you were addicted?
No, I was able to maintain the image for a while, but then I had a breakdown. My dad found me like late at night in the backyard, and I started crying. He was like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I'm a heroin addict." It was pretty intense.
And how did he take it?
He took it well.
Or were your parents the ones who put you in rehab?
Yeah, they were immediately like, "Don't worry, we'll do anything." I'm very lucky.
So when you went to rehab, do you think rehab is the reason? Because a lot of people go to rehab and it's basically like going to like a hotel, or a resort or something. It doesn't,
you move on,
and they're crazy expensive, and like you once you get out, you're doing a drug again within like 2 weeks. So do you think your rehab was beneficial?
My experience was, but it wasn't dependent on the rehab itself. Or I went to a really shitty rehab, like in the middle of downtown, really low cost, like stained beds, and like it was pretty gross. But I had an experience there. I mean, if we listen to AA, they claim, a spiritual awakening is something that describes what's necessary, some sort of pivot. I had that experience in rehab specifically with a guy. It's a kind of a funny story because he would come in with the 12-step meetings and he would hold the big book like a Bible. He was this skinny, goofy white guy with like khaki shorts, and I hated him. I thought he was a huge douchebag. And then he comes in and he said something one day: "I pray every single day to be on the front lines of battle of good and evil, to go to the most sordid spot on the entire planet."
That's what he said?
That's what he said, to do God's work. And suddenly...
Those be the craziest motherfuckers. You go to their house, you look in their closet, they got fucking pictures of little girls and shit. But anyway, keep going. Keep
I like that joke. I like it. It's like the more good we try to be, the
exactly.
worse.
And especially if you're like if all you're about is like God this, God that.
Yeah, it's like Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
That's why I am where I am.
But yeah, finish your story.
Anyway, so I found somebody who looked like this perfect image of this like spiritual guru that I had found in my reading when I was 16, 17, these bodhisattvas, right? The legend of someone who helps the world. And that's what it looked like for me at that moment. At that moment, it was worth devoting my life to. It was worth living. And then that was like the reason for living for a very long time.
So you continued with AA after you got out of rehab? Yeah. It's like kind of like the only path I've heard. I mean, I'm in AA. Kind of like the only. So
you're in AA now?
Yeah, I'm in AA now. So you do like did you do the 90 meetings in 90 days?
I did.
And you continued on?
8 years.
8 years of meetings. Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting origin story for going into psychology. So would you want to work with that population in the future, with addicts? And I mean, I know so you must have the experience on both sides. Like I have the experience where a lot of medical professionals don't trust me, because a lot of, psychiatrists and psychologists, they don't trust addicts. Mm-hmm. They always think you have like a supply somewhere, or, that you stockpile your medications or whatever it is. I'm on Suboxone at the moment. So like, this is actually a question I really wanted to ask, is that, do you think there's a way to make it so that medical professionals are more trusting of their patients when those patients are addicts and alcoholics? Or do you think there will always be this kind of, like oppositional, feeling between the two?
Yeah, it's a great question. My question would be, the oppositional feeling between the two, is the doctor the one who's solely responsible for that? Are they projecting like a paranoia?
Well, I think, when you have like hundreds of patients and many of them, I mean, there's like a 5% success rate in rehabs. So most addicts relapse. So when you're used to that and you have hundreds of patients, and let's say 10% of those patients actually make it, why wouldn't you be distrustful? Yeah. But what protocols could you put in place so that, the patients feel like they're being heard and are trusted when they're putting in the work to get sober? Yeah.
These are good questions. I feel like they fit under the broader question of how do we destigmatize addiction, and humanize addicts, right? And all the ways in which the structure, the clinic, we can see how they're dehumanized even in the protocols. Yeah. It's a really big question. At the same token, I'm sitting here, I'm 20 years old. I'm going to snap everything out of that cabinet, Yeah. As a former addict, that's a score right there, Yeah. So there's a really good question. So I teach this class, right, in the master's program, the addictions class, and it's California Institute of Integral Studies, really good at trying to integrate these various perspectives. So what I do for the class is each section is a different perspective, from the purely clinical to harm reduction to spiritual to 12 steps to pharmacological to other things. And one of the really good questions that we play with is, at what point should society intervene and set a limit? Because on the one hand, going to just the harm reduction side, which is like a very maternal, unconditional, loving space, right? Mm-hmm. Which it attempts to create in relation to the addict to sort of reduce trauma, right? Right. And yet this acting out of using the drugs still persists even within the most ideal environment.
Yeah, that's very true.
And on the other side of the spectrum, if we're just thinking about like society as the harsh father that just chops us down the hand and it incarcerates and says, no, that doesn't work so much either. So at what point should society intervene in the life of the addict? Is it
when they break the law, or should it be before? Is that kind of the question?
I don't know, but it's a question that,
if you had to make up the whole,
I don't know the answers.
I know. I'm trying to push it out of you. I'm like, tell me how you would do it if you controlled this whole system. But no, I mean, they're hard questions, and they're worth thinking.
You haven't noticed she hates psychologists.
I don't hate psychologists.
She has a thing about psychologists.
I don't hate psychologists. I think that, psychologists, a lot of them go into the field trying to treat themselves. I think that along the way, I think there's some really good psychologists. I think there's, not very good psychologists. Like I was talking about, there's like projection, but we need psychologists. We need mental health professionals. That's, widely needed. But yeah, I do have a distrust of psychologists generally. Yeah. But it's interesting meeting someone who has been on the other side. You have been treated, for, you know, your own psychological.
I've been a patient. I've been locked in rooms in hospital gowns and socks.
Yeah, exactly.
I've spent the night on the chair with the leather straps over it and in the closet.
Wait.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I feel kind of like, you know, getting to know your story is it's good for me. I'm like, you know, you're a full person and there's a reason why you went into this.
Wait. Let's get into this strapped to the bed shit.
Yeah, I agree.
What, tell me about that. What happened?
Yeah. Well, so I'm 21 years old. And I'm incredibly sheltered and privileged white kid who's addicted to heroin and never known anything like much outside of the middle class neighborhood. And I go to a detox facility, which is a 15-day lockdown facility. They also put people on 5250s in there, meaning people on extended.
Suicide.
Extended, yeah.
So I'm given a gown and hospital socks. I have the.
Were you on a 51? 50?
No, I was just there withdrawing from heroin. So
okay.
It was just like detox. It's humiliating. All of your power is stripped away. You realize you can't function as a normal person in society, and you have to be locked up. And I got there, and my roommate was schizophrenic, and he would sit up on the bed in the middle of the night and start screaming and hearing voices.
Oh God!
And he would like hover, and I'd be sleeping.
They put you in a room with someone like that.
Yeah, I've heard those horror stories. That's why I didn't do.
Because I thought I thought when people are like that, they're like housed alone. Well, that's what they do in like the jails. No, they're just okay.
I was 5150, and there's no like limit. There's no like, you know, they don't lock you in your own little room. You're like right next to the rest of the populace, and you know the medical personnel, they're coming and going. So, you know, by the time I sobered up, that's why I was in there, because I, you know, was making bad decisions and, you know, suicidal ideation, all of that. And I ended up there. And as soon as I sobered up, I'm like, I shouldn't be here. And there's people who are actually like, you know, crazy. Like they have like severe, you know, psychological issues. And this one woman like comes over to me and she's like talking to me and she's like, well, why am I here? Like, what are they doing to us? What are they doing? Like, you know, and she starts getting more and more aggressive. And I'm like, if this lady decides, and kind of bigger woman, I'm like, if she decides to punch me in the face right now, like their reactionary time is going to be very delayed, you know, getting her off of me. Yeah. So yeah, they don't. Yeah. But go on with your story. I want to hear more about how that went.
Well, so he was having a psychotic break and there was like 5 men in the room holding him down. So I decided to sleep in the closet. And then my next roommate walks in this 300-pound giant white bald dude with Nazi tattoos. Oh, and he's like, well, I'm like, how you doing, man? He's like, well, I'm having voices. I keep hearing voices tell me to kill someone. But other
that's
than that,
what he told you?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, cool. My name's Anthony. You know what? I think I'm just going to go crash in there for tonight. I brought my little blanket and went and slept in the closet again.
So how did you end up in the chair strapped up?
Well, that's the only chair in the closet. I wasn't strapped up.
Oh.
I was just like pathetically curled in a ball on top of the chair.
Oh, okay.
You know, rocking myself to sleep in the middle.
What was the turning point where you realized, okay, well, I need to fucking make a life change?
Yeah. Well, it was when I told my parents. But experiencing that feeling happened all day, every day, and everything I did would just barely keep it at bay.
So when you told your parents, was it when you saw their faces and like the disappointment in their face, was that part of the reason, letting your parents down or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, just being a failure. Yeah.
Does your sister dabble with the drugs like you did? No,
my sister is straight as an arrow.
Okay.
She's the good one.
Okay.
Did you ever have people disassociate from you?
Absolutely. My best friend, who I just spent an awesome night with a couple nights ago for a few years, he wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah.
He came and got all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like when people think that, you know, with heroin, with fentanyl, with a lot of opiates, people kind of see you as a lost cause at that point. Like you're going to die, you know? So I know that, like, for me, that was a big reason to stop. Was that like a big reason for you to stop seeing people disassociate from you, seeing people ready for you to drop dead?
I don't know. I felt the maximum amount of disgust and hate for myself. Like, I didn't need my friends to ditch me in order to know how big of a piece of shit I was at the moment, you know? So
Yeah.
I definitely had my own version of this type of experience of just pure shame.
Yeah.
And just desperately seeking to not feel that for a moment.
Yeah.
I want to get off this drug shit.
Okay.
Explain to me, what is Girls Inc? What do they do there?
Yeah, so it's like a giant nationwide nonprofit organization. They do all sorts of stuff. Specifically, it started 60 years ago, I think in California, in like some old grandma's home where she just got a bunch of girls together and like babysat them and did cool stuff. So it's like a nonprofit for girls empowerment and like family work. So the whole agency does a lot of like after school programs. They work with a lot of minority populations, specifically in the East Bay. And then within that whole thing, there's like a little clinic, mental health clinic where I work.
And what do you do for them?
Mental health clinician or therapist, or psychologist. Those are all usable terms.
So you're just like, I mean, when you say your title, but do you what actually do you do?
Therapy.
Therapy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now it's all virtual with family. So I have a set amount of cases that I organize sessions for, and it's all therapy.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had a case where that hit you real close to home, more than usual?
Yeah, all the time, man. It's like listening to people suffer. It's like falling in love with them, wishing you can do something to help them, and just bearing witness. You know, and yet watching something really beautiful happen if you're lucky. You know.
Yeah.
But if these people are alive inside of me everywhere I go, saying goodbye is very difficult.
Is it hard to, let's say you're hearing a story, a girl calls you, oh, she's trying to get over being like raped or something, and she has like this crazy traumatic story. Is it hard to, okay, well, now that this session is over, I got to go on to the next session. So basically what I'm saying, is it hard to just like, okay, after this session is over, to forget about that and then just give all your energy into this next session and hear this next sob story, and then, this hour is over, and then I go to another person.
Yes, it's very difficult. I feel it in my body. I get some sessions will I have like these little rituals, right? They're like stuff I have to do to get rid of it, like go on walks or like chain smoke cigarettes or go outside or do something that contains it. But usually after work, I just walk and let my mind circle around all of it and just let it go. And sometimes I'll cry, sometimes I'll...
Yeah, that's another question. Where do, like, you're hearing all this shit, like negative stuff all the time. What do psychologists do to get therapy, or do they just see other psychologists?
That's a great question. Yeah,
I mean, if you're a psychologist and you're doing therapy, I would feel like, okay, I already know the tricks of this therapist because I do it. So do you feel like going to a therapist, if you're a therapist, is going to even help you?
Yes, because suffering isn't because of a lack of knowledge. There's no such thing as like a perfect amount of self-knowledge that you will then not suffer. So it doesn't like matter what you know intellectually about yourself. That's like not quite the massive solution. So there's also, just as a practice, just interpersonal speaking your truth. Just as a meditation practice, something you do every single day, that it's like a vehicle. So I look at it like that. So ongoing personal work must happen alongside. Otherwise, it's a recipe for disaster, I think.
So I was asking this before, what's one of the craziest cases you've ever had that you can divulge? And again, like no names, you don't need to give any specifics that would give away personal information, but like the craziest outlier where you were just like, whoa, this is an insane story or an insane case.
Well, I definitely have like specifically one of those that has served as like my first encounter with like the tragedy of being human, you know, per se. After I graduated my bachelor's, I got sober a year, went back, finished my bachelor's, and then I got a job working at this clinic in Arizona. I was like the front line, like mental health worker. I wasn't like a clinician. It was a lockdown facility for adolescents who were, the proper way to say it is, who had behavioral and sexual problems. They were all convicted of some form of sexual assault against a minor, and this was their rehab that they were sentenced to by the courts. And if they were able to complete this rehabilitation program, they wouldn't have to register as sex offenders when they're adults.
Okay.
So it's a population of 11 to 17-year-olds who have all had, this is the extreme form of behavioral issues. And
right.
To the point, like a lot of those kids were convicted of violently raping other children.
So which particular case?
So there's this case. So it was also working with like, yeah, it's pretty juicy just from the start. Like we had, I worked with kids who were like handcuffed to a bathroom stall for 10 months and raped, or like locked in their trunk, stuff like that. And so we had this kid, he was 16. I'm going to call him K. He was big. He was bigger than all the other kids. African-American boy, tall. He was kind of like, he had this swagger about him. Like, he tried to be cool. He was like immediately different than everyone because he wouldn't conform and do any of the activities. He would always like immediately start stealing stuff. And, it was scarcity behaviors, meaning he's used to starving.
Right.
You know, it's not like intentional disruptive behavior. It's protective.
Right.
But so anyway, so the story is, he had an older brother, and these two brothers were raised by their father, and their father was pretty tyrannical. And, the father would beat them severely, like handcuff them, throw them in the trunk, and then beat them. And one day, the father went after the younger brother, my kid, Kay, and his older brother stepped in to try to protect him. And the father beat him so bad, his older brother like went limp, went down, and for days couldn't move. He was like throwing up black stuff. And the father dumped him at the hospital, and the kid had permanent brain damage.
Jesus.
So he now lived in a wheelchair, and he couldn't move his body. They thought he wasn't there. So my kid, Kay, he does some crazy things. I think he held like a knife to some little kid's throat. He was engaging in sexual behaviors that he probably learned from his father or whatever. And so he gets arrested. He comes into rehab, and we keep trying to take care of him. He immediately puts on 100 pounds. This kid was like homeless, like drinking from hoses, eating bugs and stuff.
Oh my God.
And he was my primary kid. So I would spend the whole day with him. I would wake him up. I would walk through the halls. I would do all these behavioral programs with him. He was always super rowdy. We had so much fun. He was like the first kid that was like, he did the craziest shit I could ever imagine, but I just like loved him. And it was like, I wanted everything to help this kid, everything. He was like, and his father was going to court on trial while he was in our placement, and we were preparing this kid to sit on a stand and testify against his father. And the trial happened, and his father walked free. And 2 weeks later, this kid had a meltdown and beat the crap out of some other kid, and we went on a 4-hour escapade with him destroying everything. And it ends with me holding his face and us holding him down as we're calling the cops, because we have to. This kid is like he intentionally provoked everything and was sent to jail. And I kept racking my mind because it was so terrible to think this kid created this and did this on purpose because of the pain he was experiencing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that I could do. And why would he do that? It was just, so he went off to jail. I never saw him again. He spent the next years in jail.
Man. And that's a really sad story. I mean, just perpetuated violence and probably sexual assault and what that'll do to somebody. And, who knows what happened to the father, when he was a kid that made him act out like that.
Yeah.
Too. So, I mean, I'm sure you think about that kid. What do you, like now when you think about that case, there's not really much you could have done, right? Do you ever go back and think about what you would have done differently? Not that there was anything wrong that you did, but do you ever this is such a crazy case. Like, do you ever comb through and think about other measures you might have wanted to take now that you're older and more experienced? Or do you ever think about this case when you're looking at, a little kid now in the area that you work and kind of, apply what you know from that to new cases?
Good question. I think about what I wish I would have said in the final moments to him. I followed him around for 4 hours, trying to talk him down.
Yeah.
So I also think what I derive from that is that this acting out has a meaning and contains value. And so my function is to allow someone to try to articulate and try to put something in words that they're experiencing viscerally or enacting perpetually.
Right. So you can kind of break that cycle, because if they can maybe put into words what they're feeling instead of just, you going to violence or destruction or self-destruction. I mean, that's what he was basically doing, right? I mean, he was destructing things around him, but he knew, that he was self-destructing in the process.
Yeah. Another interpretation is that he made his world safer by putting himself behind bars. Because it's a cold, unsafe world when your father gets to walk free after that. And so he was creating something that was lacking from the world and his father, which is containment and safety.
Are you depressed?
Depressed. Depends on what I think about when I think about politics.
I know, right? In the world today, how can you not be?
Have you been diagnosed with depression at any point of your life?
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could be. I have inside of me, there's a low position that I sometimes occupy from time to time. But I have more anxiety, I think, than depression. I'm more kind of high strung than I am.
So you said the way you deal with the troubles of work, you go on walks, you say, and you cry?
Yeah, I try to just be with...
You can make yourself cry just like...
No, it's rare.
Will Smith. Will Smith is the only one I know who could do that shit.
My friend did it pretty well in 6th grade when he wanted to get away with something.
Oh, God. I hated those kids so much. The ones who can cry on demand. She did this to me. I would get that with this one girl all the time.
I often compartmentalize. I'm used to it by now. It's easy. When I really want to process it, I'll be with it, take a bath, go on a walk, just let my mind obsess about it.
Do you only work with kids and teenagers and shit?
No, that's just displacement. I've worked in the jails. I've worked in rehabs. I've worked in a lot of different places.
Do you, is there like a big rise of people that you talk to, suffering from depression because of the current state of the economy?
I think so. I think anxiety too. I think COVID's making a lot of people anxious. There's this sudden unknown element of every social encounter. That's anxiety provoking. There's also a huge loss of just being with people.
Yeah.
Loneliness.
Another question I wanted to ask you, how do you feel, or what's your views on like medicine?
What kind of medicine?
Just medicine, period. Like Tylenol, the pills that you got prescribed when you got in an accident or whatever. Do you think, do you think the medical field is really there to, not the medical field, what's the field that handles pharmaceutical? Do you think pharmaceutical companies are really here to cure you or to keep you sick so they can stay in business? Because if everyone gets cured, like they would go out of business, right? It's common sense. So I feel like the pharmaceutical companies are here to, like, they know you're gonna get they know you're gonna get fucking addicted to those pain pills. Like they know, yo, you have ADD. Oh, let's give them these pills instead of. Why don't you put them in sports? Take them out. Let's give him some exercise or change his diet. Like, we're just going to give you some pills to take. Like,
for ADHD, there's like speed, and then there's other kinds of medications that they're finding now. But they had the research for that way before. But they're putting people on speed. So I mean, I think that's a hard question, but that's for you, my friend.
Yeah. So do you think? Do you think like the pharmaceutical companies, the medical field is there to really help people or to keep you coming back and wanting more?
It's a great question. I think it's mixed. Because I think there's good things. When we say, so if we just limit our conversation to just mental illness pharmaceuticals, medication helps a lot of people. And there are a lot of people who are willing to take the bad side of it because the good side of it helps them. There's a lot of people on long-term medication that are advocates of that and believe that their life is improved because of it. So one example is addiction medications, methadone, Suboxone, Subutex. Are they just replacement drugs? Are you still addicted? Or are they allowed to experience an increased quality of life? Is that worth it? We can bring the same questions to medication for psychosis, which what happens is they know, and this is back to my original comments on how primitive neuroscience really is. They know that this whatever region is the one that produces the delusions. They know that when this region is reduced in functioning, the person doesn't have delusions, so they create medication. It's essentially a sledgehammer to brain functioning. It's like reducing the function of a computer.
Yeah.
So the person kind of looks like a zombie. There's this weird polarity between, is it making them a zombie or is it helping them? And there's always sort of both at play. And then the question becomes, who's the ultimate judge of whether or not that's right? We have to talk to the person to see if it's, because some people take psychotic medication and one person might think they look like a zombie, but they're experiencing a real life that they wouldn't be able to function without it.
So I have a friend and she's manic depressive and she hurts other people when she goes through episodes. I mean, destruction. I mean, violence, all of it, but she doesn't want to take, psychoactive medications. She doesn't want to take Librium. She doesn't want to take any of it because she feels like she's doled down. She doesn't have those high highs and those low lows, because those high highs, a lot of creative people like having that when they have manic depression, you're able to read 3 books, write a book, study a language, start an art
show. How did you learn French in 2 days?
Yeah, exactly. It's like these people, they're like, wow, I have superpowers when I'm having my highest of highs. But when they're at their lowest of lows, or sometimes even at the peak of that highest of high, that's when all of a sudden, the wreckage starts. Do you think that, it should be mandatory for people like that to take medication for the greater good for the rest of humanity, someone that they might end up, punching in the street? Or do you think that it should be really, the person's choice, and then they can end up going to jail if they want?
These are good questions. What do you think? Just imagine on Facebook if Donald Trump came out and said, we're going to force people to take medication.
Yeah.
I mean, they just said that, basically. They said that when the COVID, they say they have a COVID treatment and everyone is required to take it.
I mean, I feel like I'm more okay with that given it's a pandemic and it's not like...
But how can you force people to take a vaccine? To inject themselves... To inject something in their bodies. How can the government force you to do that?
Because the vaccine doesn't work if a certain population doesn't take it, right? That's how vaccines work. If some people don't take it, no, it doesn't work for everybody.
You're going to take it?
Donald Trump, doesn't he, didn't
No, don't. Are you going to take the vaccine? Yes or no?
If there's a vaccine, and if, like, you know, actual doctors say, like Dr. Fucci or
we already have a bunch of vaccines in our bodies.
We already have a
right?
bunch. We already have a whole bunch of vaccines. If the
Are
vaccine-
you going to take the vaccine? Yes or no?
If it is proven to be a vaccine for COVID-19, yeah, I'll take the vaccine.
As long as Donald Trump doesn't tell me to do it.
Well, he's
If Donald Trump, because remember how he said there was this vaccine, and he was like, we know that there's this vaccine that might work, and, you know, and it turned out that there's like no scientific evidence that it could work at all. I need scientific evidence to show that it's going to work. So if like Kaiser's like, we have all this evidence, you can read up on it. There's studies, there's trials. You need to have clinical trials. You need to have, you know, a body of research to show that a vaccine works. If I see that proof, then I'll take the vaccine. But if Donald Trump is like, there's this medication, what was it for anyway? He said there was a vaccine. He was like, it's a medication for something.
No, he was talking about
different.
chloroquine or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was like, "This will work," and like all the doctors. Were
Well,
like,
the
"No,
motherfucker
we
said,
don't know
inject
that."
yourself with bleach, so you shouldn't listen to nothing he says.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's
When it
why
comes to
I don't know
that.
about
Died
Donald.
because of that. That's a lot
Well,
of
if
people
you're
are
stupid enough to inject yourself with bleach, then that's your fault.
Yeah, no. So like, I wouldn't listen to what, you know, Donald Trump has to say. He's not a doctor, but if an actual doctor or my, you know, physician.
Well, when
tells me
people,
there's a
when Donald
vaccine,
Trump says that, people think that doctors are telling Donald Trump to say that. So they're like, okay, well, they're just going to listen. But the average person is not going to listen. You got to be a dumb motherfucker to
actually
Donald Trump
think
says
that-
you need to inject yourself with bleach and the bleach will kill it. And if you're stupid enough to go and do that, then you deserve
It's
whatever
like the idea of
happens.
just, if you just, you know, when you start to get sick, drink like two handles of vodka and it'll kill the illness. I mean, that's also a belief too, but it'll probably just give you alcohol poisoning,
Yeah.
you know?
All right, so doctor, you said you wanted to start your own private practice in the future, right?
Yeah.
Well-
I mean, that just means I get to see my own patients. And they
What would
pay
you
me.
want that population to be? What would that look like? Would you do psychoanalysis? What kind of
Yeah.
pillows would you use?
That's a great question. Well, we're in the virtual age starting now. Looks like the future is all, you know, through the computer screen these days. It's probably going to take place just like that. I see my patients now through video or on the phone. That works well.
Okay. So even if we get out of this virtual age, would you still use that as a method, or do you think it's good to be face to face for therapy?
A lot of people have a lot of different opinions with this. I think if the person is used to it, or they prefer it, or they want it, they're not losing anything compared to real face to face. But a lot of people just crave the face to face. I think this is going to stay the norm moving forward. I mean, it's not like COVID's
Really?
going to disappear.
You enjoy you enjoy the Zoom meetings more than face to face?
I mean, I hate Zoom, but there's something about being able to work from home, from your own space. Patients like it. They don't have to drive places.
That's true.
Are you one of those doctors who I'm watching you on the Zoom and then he has a nice suit on. Then when you turn the Zoom off, you stand up, you in your boxers.
Do I wear sweatpants in some of my Zoom sessions? Possibly.
Because a lot of these motherfucking medical professionals or people on Zoom, I got a tie and shirt on. As soon as they click off, they stand up. They're like in boxers and like.
Yeah, I've seen that. Or in business meetings,
Yeah,
people, you know,
You're dressed up from the waist up.
I just don't try to stand up.
So how long have you been working at, was it Girls Inc.? Yeah, Girls
2
Inc.
years now.
2 years?
Yeah, I'm done in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Oh, so this is just for the hours. That's why you're working there?
That's why I started there for my pre-doc internship. And I was hired for postdoc as well.
Would you want to stay there after and like be like a full-time, like, no, it's not your vibe?
So you're going to start your own practice immediately after you're done with this,
Yeah.
basically?
Well, I'm going to recuperate for a few months.
Okay.
I've been working like multiple jobs.
Like, because, yeah, like when you're getting your hours, like they don't pay you as much as you're not.
I've done 7,000 hours
Oh
unpaid.
my God.
Unpaid?
Unpaid.
Yeah, you
like
get
hustling. I was
lot
an
of
Uber
money.
driver, barely making rent for years with multiple jobs.
Oh my
It's
God.
finally all over in 2 weeks.
And you say you teach somewhere?
I do. I'm a professor at California Institute of Integral Studies.
Ah.
Yeah. The master's and the doctorate program there.
How's that?
It's a blast. It's crazy. I didn't even finish graduation yet before I started my first class.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite the flip. I'm in the expert position, expected to know something, expected to teach something. I love it, though. It's just very creative for me.
Have you gotten any... It's going to be a crazy question, but have you gotten any crazy advances from your little young students?
You know what? This is a funny question. I think I can feel the fact it's power. I mean, the power is attractive to people. So the moment, there are some people, if they encounter me as just Anthony the dude, they would have a very different experience than they encountered me as Anthony, their therapist, or Dr. Anthony.
I've heard about that.
Their teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very normal, common thing. So I have to be good with boundaries. I try.
Professors are not allowed to date their students. I mean, they're grown women. It's not like you're a high school teacher.
This is true. I work at a very progressive school, so
everybody who's listening, he put up the two. What is those? What do you call it?
The bunny ears.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a no.
That's a no. My intention, my plan, and my track record is to stay professional.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with everything coming out, you don't want to get canceled before you even start.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, you gotta
better man than me. Better man than me.
So I have one.
I also have a partner, so that helps with the motivation.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I had a question that's about your current job. With young, what was the question? I just forgot it. So your population is young girls, and so
not necessarily
young girls.
Young, right? No, like
No.
his
girls. It serves
like,
boys and girls.
Oh, it's boys and girls.
It was originally
Okay. Oh, this was the question. You work with a younger population though. Do you go down to ages 6, 7, 8, 9? So do you ever use, I had a sand tray teacher after my friend died when I was younger. Do you ever use the sand tray method or what other methods?
Wait. What is that method?
Okay. So
Explain
sand tray, and I didn't really like it. I had my, my therapist or whatever, we just did whatever we wanted. I'm like, I'm not doing that. But basically sand tray, it's like a box. It's a sand tray. It's a tray filled with sand.
You're saying a sand tray.
Sand tray.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so then you have little, toys that you put in the sand tray, and you can build stuff. And basically the kids, because they don't always know how to articulate what's going on at home or what's going on with their lives, the idea is that they'll have this kind of make-believe world, and they'll show the therapist through play what's going on in their life. Do you think this is an effective method? I mean, I know for me it wasn't, but maybe it would be for other children, maybe the younger ages, 4 or 5. 6.
Yeah, I'm a fan. Or another general way to describe it is play therapy. When we were in a real office, the whole office is filled with toys. The kid comes in and I just follow him. But, everyone's different, but playing with a child is valuable because they're less verbal.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and they kind of show you their world too, through their fantasies and through the worlds they create.
Yeah, it's like watching them dream. Because dreams are also this sort of artistic creations that are metaphoric in value. I had a kid, 11-year-old girl with a lot of loss and trauma. She came in and I asked her, oh, you want to play in the sand tray? Maybe make a scene of your family or something. She built the whole scene to her father's funeral instantly. And she spent a half hour burying her father and unburying her father and burying her father.
Oh my God.
She did that 2 sessions in a row. And while she was looking at me, she was so anxious and she had this huge grin on her face and she was completely disassociated. So what she was expressing, she could not consciously be with in the least bit. 2 years later, she never spoke about that again. It was like a very brief moment of her in touch with something that she didn't
know how to process.
Exactly.
Wow.
So all my kids, I play with them in some capacity. Start playing video games with kids while in the middle of session. We go on these little virtual explorations of these worlds. I got little kids. I'm like, you betrayed me.
You're not playing Fortnite, are you? That's just violence and violence.
So I love that story. Do you have any other stories with, other kids where, you thought you were just playing and you were maybe even caught off guard by something they did that explained their behavior, explained their history?
It's a good question. Well, it's not that the play unveils some secret truth that I couldn't see before. It's that it offers an opportunity for them to make sense of something that's like constantly coming up, per se. So that the point isn't to arrive at the truth, but is to constantly create and recreate meaning around the most painful experiences, around their story and their narrative. And over time, it allows for more flexibility, more wiggle room, more growth.
And an ability to kind of start a discussion, maybe from the actions they're showing or like how they're dealing with it through play, shows you how they're dealing with it in real life, maybe.
Yeah.
Zola, what was the best form of therapy that you experienced?
Actually, I really liked my sand tray teacher. I didn't like playing in the sand. I didn't like that. I just wanted to talk to her. When I was younger, I had no interest in school. I said I had a stomach ache every day. I went home. There's some loss. My best friend died. Then my godmother, who I thought of as a mother figure, I called her mommy. My mom was always at work, and something happened with my family and her, and she left, and I never heard from her again. And that was kind of my connection to my friend who passed away, was, her mother. And, after all this happened, I wasn't interested in school. I was thinking about death a lot. I was thinking about what happens after you die. I was trying to figure out ways of how I could communicate with my friend. So being able to go to therapy, it wasn't this person discovered all my issues and, figured it all out and gave me a solution, but it was definitely a place of solace where I was able to have control back. Because in an institution, whether it be school or, any other kind of institutionalized space, everything is kind of, it's out of your control. But when you're in that room with that therapist, you're able to choose what you're going to do. It's oh, what are we going to do today? I want to make stuffed animals. What are you going to do today? Let's make cake. What are we going to do today? Let's do this. So you kind of have more control over what you want to do. And I was able to talk to her about a lot of different things. So I liked my sand tray teacher a lot. And then I started having other therapists throughout when I was a teenager. That did not work.
So, Dr. Anthony, hearing all this about Zola, you want to diagnose her on live radio right now?
Heck no.
No?
Heck no. I only diagnose when I absolutely have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in your mind, your eyes, you're scratching your beard, you're thinking damn, this girl is such and such. In your mind, you're thinking of the shit, aren't you? No?
In my mind, I'm wow, that's a beautiful story. He sounds like a good therapist. Or that's the most we can do, is just offer some solace.
Yeah.
And you can't prescribe anything, right?
No.
Because you're a psychiatrist, right?
Right. You have to have special.
Yeah.
All right, Zola, do you have a whole book. Do you have any more questions for the doctor before we get out of here?
I think that's it. Yeah, I think I asked all my questions, but I wrote down maybe in a different order, but I think that's it. Yeah.
All right, so Dr. Anthony, what would your advice be for someone who's struggling, who's depressed right now because maybe they lost their job, because of the COVID, or a business owner who's about to lose his business because of COVID, or a person who's like a socialite and now they're like depressed because they can't live the lifestyle that they were living before. What would your advice be to those people who are like suffering from like heartache and pain, and they're like, oh, probably some are like thinking about suicide because they're like losing all their shit and they're like about to be homeless in the street, or like,
yeah. Well,
I mean, I know every case is different, but what's like one thing would you say that, or a few things that you would say, like, oh, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, message, and also maybe like who to call, where to go. Like a lot of people, they don't know where to start, you know?
Yeah. Well, in terms of suicide, the answer is easy. You just Google suicide hotline, call immediately. But I think of change. Change is inevitable. Loss is inevitable. It's easy for somebody to spout out a bunch of things about what you need. But I think change and loss and destruction are all opportunities to find meaning. Find something. I like to tell people, find something that's worth doing no matter what's happening to you, to the world, to anything, where you just lose sight of money, of people, of everything. And it just makes your existence tolerable for a little bit longer.
So basically make a negative into a positive.
Yeah, or just find something passionate and suffer nobly and keep suffering and stop trying to cop out and fix your life instantly and do something meaningful.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, tell people where they can find you. If you want to, like, give the people your Instagram, or like how they can get in contact with Girls Inc., or you want to shout out your college or whatever. Shout out your
new practice.
Yeah.
Maybe your new practice.
Well, I don't have any of that prepared. I don't have an official. I think I'm gonna wait to.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you don't have that yet, but yeah. But like, tell the people where they can find you, contact you, in case someone wants to like get some advice after hearing this podcast. And
sure, yeah, they can go to California Institute of Integral Studies website. There's tons of great resources there. Girls Inc. of Alameda is just one of the many agencies who sees children. They can call Access if anyone in the Bay Area has insurance and they're looking for any type of service. They have Medi-Cal. They can call that Access hotline. That's the number one place to find resources.
And can they find you on any social media platforms?
No, I have yet to create a professional. I'm going to wait. I'm going
to
keep
LinkedIn?
Not yet.
That's why I couldn't find you.
Yeah,
I was looking him up so long.
I gotta be real careful. Like, I have to maintain only professional presence virtually these days. My Instagram.
That's a bad life. So you can't post a picture of you getting drunk as shit in the bar.
I will on my personal Instagram.
Oh, okay.
But that's not for public.
Okay.
That's like friends and family.
All right. Well, like he said, if you guys have any issues out there in the world and are struggling mentally, want someone to talk to, you can't call him personally, obviously, but please reach out. Girls Inc.
Or just therapists. Just Google therapist, psychology.com. I think therapy is wonderful. I think everyone would benefit from being able to speak out their heart to another human.
And from the words of the great Dr. Anthony Morice. Morice or Morice? Perfect. Morice? Morice? Yeah. In the words of the great Dr. Morice, Anthony Morice, if you're depressed, just make a negative into a positive.
those are your words.
Well, I said that. That was what well, in the great words of Jordan Owandi.
Stop trying to find meaning.
Make a negative into a positive. Stop fucking crying. Those are my words, not his. But yeah, Zola, do you have anything? Tell the people where they can find you again.
Oh, you can find me for Instagram. You can find me at Zola, Zola. Hjelm, HJELM. And I'm creating an online women's magazine called Stupid Girl Things. That's stupidgirlthings.com. Also, please feel free to submit your writing, or, if you want to be interviewed, just submit your contact information at submit at stupidgirlthings.com. Thank you.
All right. Well, this is the end of this episode, and I want to thank Dr. Anthony Morice. I keep forgetting. Is it Morice?
You're doing great. Morice,
it's like Morrissey, but Morice.
All right. I want to thank Dr. Anthony for coming on. Thank you to Zola for coming on and co-hosting with me today. Yeah. And any last words?
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. These are great combos.
Yeah. Thanks, Jordan. This has been great.
All right. And we are out. You.